We put our faith in complex chemical compounds with the same desperate hope that you put in a bundle of crushed leaves tied with a prayer. We still seek authorities in white coats instead of black robes to shield us from the chaos of our own biology, to stand between us and the great, silent darkness. Your knowledge was flawed, your tools were primitive, but your purpose is one that will never be obsolete. To answer the door in the middle of the night, and to offer a steady hand when all other lights have gone out. The day is bled out, leaving only a gray stain in the square of the window. You sit on your stool, the wood worn smooth by years of your own exhaustion. The air in your hut is a thick tapestry of smells, the sharp, clean scent of boiled yarrow, the bitter ghost of feverfew, and beneath it all, the sweet, cloying odor of sickness that never quite leaves the walls. You run a thumb over the rim of your mortar. It is empty now, but you can still feel the phantom grit of dried herbs. You know every treacherous root, every stone that turns underfoot. But today, the path feels different. Today, you feel the eyes on your back. They are more persistent than the autumn chill, a prickling sensation between your shoulder blades. Ahead, two women, Agnes and Elspeth, are talking by the village well. Their laughter, loud and full a moment before, is cut short as they see you approach. It does not simply stop, it is strangled. Their smiles tighten into thin, unreadable lines. As you pass, you give a slight, formal nod. This is history as it was lived, a sensory, immersive, and often brutal experience, shaped by beliefs that feel alien to us now, yet driven by the same human heart that beats in your chest today. We will explore their survival, their fears, their forgotten rituals, and the quiet dignity of their existence. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. You are a mechanic, trying to fix a miraculous machine you have never seen, armed only with a tattered manual that describes its outer paint job and the sounds it makes when it is broken. This highlights the sheer power of the human mind to create vast systems of logic, even in a total vacuum of facts. Without data, we invent dogma. You murmur a plea to Saint Rock, his name a familiar shield against the great pestilence that is always lurking just over the horizon. A story told to frighten children and chasten kings. You picture his icon, the dog at his side, the plague sore on his leg. He is a saint who understands suffering. The prayer is a tax you pay to heaven, a formal appeal to the highest court. But then, the words change. So, this isn't knowledge from a book. You wouldn't know how to read the strange black marks the priest makes on his vellum. It lives in the rhythm of the grinding a mortar and pestle, worn smooth and concave by your grandmother's hands, sits on the table. You pour the bark into its stone belly and begin to work. The soft thump, thump, scrape is a prayer. This is your library, your inheritance. You cannot promise paradise, but you can offer a poultice that might soothe the fire in a child's lungs. You deal not in grand theories or promises of the afterlife, but in the immediate, desperate business of breath, of one more sunrise, of the dirt under the fingernails of hope. Have we truly evolved, or have we just found more sophisticated ways to manage the same fundamental terrors? We have mapped the human genome, a language more complex than any Latin text, but we still tell ourselves stories to make sense of suffering. Your payment is not an abstract number in a place you will never see. It is the warmth of the fire you will feed with wood given in thanks, the taste of a meal earned by staring down death. It is a stark reminder that the first purpose of a community is not commerce, but the mutual exchange of care. Ask yourself, in building our world of sterile transactions and paid-for kindness, what have we forgotten about the currency of a life? It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. Section 13. The burden of the skeptic's gaze. You walk the path to the millers, the empty sack slung over your shoulder. The air is sharp with the scent of wood smoke and the cold promise of an early frost. It is a walk you have made 100 times. The people for whom history was not an event, but the endless turning of the seasons, the gnawing hunger in the belly, the fear of a bad harvest, and the desperate prayer for a healthy child. We will walk through their world not as observers, but as inhabitants. We will feel the chill of the stone floor on our bare feet, smell the peat smoke in the air, and understand why a cross carved into a door was not just decoration, but a shield. It's hard to overstate the profound ignorance of the age, an ignorance born not of stupidity, but of piety. To cut open a human body, even after death, is a grievous sin. It is a desecration of a temple that will one day be resurrected on the last day, made whole and perfect again. How could a soul reclaim a body that had been profaned, its parts scattered by a surgeon's knife? So all your knowledge is based on observing the surface, the outputs, the color of the skin, the smell of the breath, the consistency of evacuated blood. You add the feathery leaves of yarrow, an herb for wounds both seen and unseen, and a splash of water from the bucket. You stir with your finger, creating a gritty greenish paste. This is medicine. This is a craft learned at your own mother's knee, a knowledge passed down like a worn-out spoon, practical and without sentiment. But it is not enough. As you spread the poultice onto a square of clean, thrice-boiled linen, your lips begin to move. The first words are for the church, for the God who judges, and the saints who intercede. Your mother taught you about this one, her voice a ghost in your memory, as real as the ache in your back. The willow weeps by the water, she would say, her hands guiding yours, and so it knows how to weep the fever out of a body. You take a pinch, your mind a flurry of inherited instructions that have no words. Not too much, or the gut will churn. Enough to bite, but not to burn. You look at your hands in the fading light. They are a map of your life. They are stained with the green of crushed herbs, the brown of the good earth, the faint, lingering scent of another person's pain. They are not the clean, pale hands of a priest who deals in souls, or a scholar who deals in ink. They are the hands of a gardener in the unruly wilderness of the human body. You are not learned enough to read the Gospels, but you can read the color of a man's phlegm. Your work is woven into a brutal, beautiful web of mutual obligation. The health of the village is quite literally your daily bread. If they thrive, you eat. If they falter, you starve. We have since professionalized this sacred exchange. We have turned care into a salaried job, a billable hour, a transaction logged in a digital ledger. There is an efficiency to it, a clean and sterile distance, but it severs the artery that connects the act of helping to the act of living. We are here to feel the cold, to understand the fear, and to walk for a moment in the worn-out shoes of the people who survived a world lit only by fire and faith. We will explore the weight of their superstitions, the gnawing reality of their hunger, and the strange, resilient beauty of their rituals. Because to understand them is to understand the bedrock of our own world, the anxieties, hopes, and silent labors that shaped everything that came after. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. This is the moment before the world begins, a private kingdom of cold and quiet. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. This is not a story of kings in their castles or knights in their shining, expensive armor. Forget the grand tapestries of war and conquest you see in books. We are here for the threads that are never seen, the small, frayed, human threads. We are here for the life of the miller, the weaver, the alewife, and the farmer. You pray to Saint Roch, the patron of plague sufferers, though this is not the great pestilence, just a fever that burns without reason. The healer spoke of her urine, how dark it was, a sign of an excess of black bile, the humor of melancholy and earth. He suggested herbs meant to purge it, to restore the divine balance. Every action is a negotiation with a system you cannot see, a desperate plea to an engine you are forbidden to open. Chapter 6. A Prayer and a Poultice. The child's skin is a furnace. Each breath is a shallow, ragged thing, a tiny bell tolling in the stillness of the room. You have done all you know to do. You have changed the straw in the pallet, forced sips of cool water past his cracked lips, and now you turn to the final act of a desperate mother. Your hands, raw from lie and fieldwork, work with a strange delicacy. In the wooden bowl, you crush the silvery slivers of willow bark, its scent clean and bitter. The air in the cottage is thick with the scent of wood smoke and sickness. Your movements are slow, deliberate, a ritual against the panic that gnaws at the edges of the day. You reach for a familiar clay pot, its surface cool and unglazed against your fingertips. It makes a soft, scraping sound on the worn wooden table, a sound as familiar as the chiming of the matins bell. Inside is a pale, fine powder, ground willow bark. It smells of earth and bitter frost. The chicken Thomas gave you in exchange for easing his wife's birthing pains is cooped for the night, its soft clucking a small living sound against the encroaching silence. The day's work is done, but the work is never done. Tomorrow, you will need to walk to the creek to gather more watermint before the frost claims it. You will check on the comfrey patch, praying the beetles have not found the tender leaves. The work is never done because sickness and injury are never done. The fear is never done. But then neither is the hope. Or perhaps it was young William, whose newborn you swaddled when it came into the world blue and silent, coaxing a cry from its lungs with a cold shock of water. This is the intricate ledger of the village. There is no gold, no silver coin that can truly pay for a life saved from the brink. Coin is for lords and taxes. It is a cold, dead thing. Your payment is life itself. It is the squawking chicken that will become a life-giving soup. It is the heavy sack of grain that promises sustenance. This is not a story of kings or crusades or the gleaming armor of knights. Those are the tales carved in stone. We are here for the stories written in dust, in the soot above a hearth, in the weary lines on a forgotten face. This is Sleepy History, where we listen for the whispers of the lives that were lived in the quiet spaces between the great events. Section 1. Introduction. The first sound you hear is not the rooster, but the slow, heavy toll of the church bell, counting the hours before the sun has even thought of rising. It is a sound that lives in your bones, a constant reminder of time, God, and death, all measured out in cold iron. Outside, the air is so sharp it could cut you. Inside, the embers of last night's fire are gray dust, and the darkness is a living thing, thick with the smell of sleep, sweat, and damp wool. You have no concept of a germ, a virus, a cell. The inner landscape of the human body is a complete mystery, a sacred, sealed vessel that God locked on the day of creation. Your treatments, and those of the village healer, are all aimed at these external signs, because the internal mechanisms are the exclusive domain of God and His angels. You cool her forehead with a cloth soaked in spring water, hoping to temper the inner fire. In the long, dark nights of your world, when a fever was a death sentence and every cough could be the last, which was the greater comfort? The cold, hard fact of a virus we cannot see? Or the belief that a cure was hidden in plain sight, a secret whispered from God to a simple yellow flower? To be the one who knows things others do not is to be set apart. Expertise in any age creates a space around a person, a space that can be filled with respect, but just as easily with suspicion and fear. Your cottage on the fringe is the original home office of the misunderstood expert. Ask yourself, when your only power is a secret, is loneliness the price of survival? That's section 17. The sun sets, painting the sky the color of a fresh wound, then a healing bruise. A final, bloody smear of light catches the thatch of your roof before sinking below the indifferent hills. The air grows teeth. You are cleaning your mortar, the heavy stone cool against your palms. With a worn piece of antler, you scrape out the last of the willow paste, its bitter, medicinal scent clinging to the air like a ghost. The exchange is too sacred for such small words. It is a sacrament of survival. Later that afternoon, after the chicken has been silenced and prepared for the pot, you find something else on your doorstep. A small, heavy sack made of rough-spun cloth. Inside is barley. Not a huge amount, but enough for a week of bread, a week of porridge. There is no note. No one saw who left it, but you know. It was Goodwife Elspeth, whose son you helped set a broken arm last harvest. Section 1. Introduction. A single bell tolls in the frozen air, not for prayer, but for a death. The sound is thin and brittle, and it does not travel far. It is absorbed by the thatched roofs, the damp wool of your coat, the thick, unmoving fog that clings to the river. This is the sound of your world, a small, solitary note in a vast and quiet. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Ask yourself, when the body is in pain, is the most powerful medicine the one you can see, or the one you can simply believe in? You kneel by the pallet, the rough wool scratching your knees. You try to picture what is happening inside Agnes. In the flickering candlelight, her skin has the waxy sheen of a dying flower. You imagine the four humors, the very liquids of life, warring within her. Her blood, you think, must be boiling, a sanguine tide rising too high, turning her cheeks a feverish red. Her spirit, a fragile, precious thing, struggles against a corrupting vapor, a miasma that seeped in from the night air, or perhaps rose from the marsh at the edge of the village. You are a reader of a text more ancient than any book in the parish priest's locked chest. And here lies a quiet tragedy of time. We see a plant today, and we classify it, pinning it down with a Latin name, its genome sequenced and stored as data. You saw that same plant and you read its legend, its purpose signed by the hand of God. We have gained an immense, almost terrifying power to manipulate the building blocks of life. But in our quest for data, have we lost the story? When it sputters to life with a cry that cuts the night, the mother weeps with gratitude. But later, in the market, she will make the sign against the evil eye as you pass. You saved her child, but you did it with a knowledge that feels like a cheat, a bargain struck with shadows. Your expertise, your very existence, lives on the boundary between the known and the unknown, and your address is a constant reminder of that fact. Today, we call it imposter syndrome, or the loneliness of specialization. But your life is the physical embodiment of it. The rise of these universities, these institutions, is not a sun rising on a dark world. It is the shadow of a fortress being built, and its walls are meant to keep women like you out. Ask yourself, when does knowledge cease to be a tool for healing and become a weapon for control? When the book becomes more important than the body, and a credential more vital than a cure. The story of the new physicians is a quiet, chilling prophecy. That being declared wise by men is not the same thing as being wise. Her fever broke this morning, he says, and his voice is a rough, unpolished thing, thick with spent fear and raw gratitude. She asked for bread. Two simple words asked for bread that mean everything. They mean a child has returned from the precipice. An appetite is a sign of life's victory over the encroaching shadows. He pushes the chicken into your hands. Its warmth seeps through the feathers, a living, breathing payment. Its panicked heartbeat thumps against your palms. You do not say thank you. He does not say you are welcome. But the echo of their footsteps, the quiet rhythm of their survival, is the ground on which we stand. Think of the detox teas and cleanses bought in brightly lit shops today. They promise to purge toxins, to wash away impurities we can neither see nor name. While far less dramatic than a leech on the temple, they stem from the exact same human impulse, the belief that we can purify ourselves by removing something bad from within. We no longer bleed ourselves, but the desire to physically expel our ailments remains a potent force in our quest for health. It is the quiet, simmering conflict between evidence-based medicine and the promises of alternative therapies, between the scientific establishment and the charismatic wellness guru. Each claims a different path to wholeness, and each views the other with a profound and often unspoken suspicion. The debate over whose wisdom can truly heal us, the one that maps our cells or the one that realigns our energy, is as old as that village church, its stones saturated with the prayers of the desperate. The curled leaf that mimics a serpent's tongue is a ward against its bite. The heart-shaped leaf of the wood sorrel is for matters of love and courage. The natural world is imbued with intent, with a soul. It is not a resource to be plundered, but a partner in the great, difficult act of survival. Your knowledge is not of botany. It is a theology written in chlorophyll, a faith passed down through generations, not in scripture, but in the soil itself. They need your hands to deliver their babies and your herbs to cool their fevers. But your knowledge makes them uneasy. It is a knowledge not learned from a Latin book or a distant university, but passed down, woman to woman, a tangled root of observation, tradition, and whispered secrets. You are a living library of unwritten remedies. When the village midwife brings you a newborn, blue and silent, you know to clear its throat with your little finger and blow a sharp puff of air into its mouth. One that takes your wisdom, born of mud and mercy, and recasts it as a demonic pact. The coming age will not seek to correct your errors. It will seek to erase your existence. It will call your garden a devil's patch, your remedies potions, your knowledge witchcraft. Progress, you realize, is not a clean ascending path. It is a tangled thicket. Sometimes it is merely one form of ignorance replacing another, but the new one arrives with better clothes, more authority, and the power to burn what it does not understand. Then there is a knock. Not the frantic pounding of a father fearing the death of his child, but a soft, hesitant rap. You open the door to find Thomas standing there. The hollowed-out look of terror is gone from his eyes, replaced by a weariness so deep it seems to have settled in his bones. In his arms, he does not hold a feverish child. He holds a chicken, plump and squawking, its feet bound with a piece of twine. It struggles, a frantic burst of life against his chest. Their desperate need for community in the face of chaos is the bedrock of our own societies. Their fears shaped our laws, their prayers shaped our skylines, and their resilience is written into our very DNA. They were not characters in a storybook. They were the architects of the quiet, unseen scaffolding that holds up our world. They endured plagues, famines, and terrors we can barely imagine, all without the language to define their struggles or the tools to easily fix them. They simply continued. Their names are lost to the soil they tilled. It is a visceral proof, a sermon preached in his own blood. To a future world, this will seem the very picture of medieval ignorance, a barbarism born of fear. Yet within the logic of this world, it is a perfect, closed circle. If illness is an excess, you must create a deficit. The sight of the bloodletting was not a side effect of the cure. It was the most powerful ingredient. It was a psychological balm, a placebo so potent it was considered effective medicine for centuries. And do not think we have outgrown the ghost of this belief. But you were his rival. Your very existence, your ability to soothe a cough or set a bone, challenged the totality of his spiritual authority. You offered a different kind of salvation, not for the soul, but for the body that housed it. And in a world where the sacred and the profane were woven into a single cloth, that was a dangerous thing to be. This tension is a ghost that still haunts our own time, though the players have changed. It is the simple, profound belief that the Creator, in His mercy, has marked the plants of the earth with clues to their divine purpose. The world is not a random assortment of growth and decay. It is a living book, a divine prescription waiting to be read by those with the eyes to see. This conviction transforms everything. A walk to gather firewood is no longer just a chore. It is an act of sacred interpretation. A journey through the woods is a conversation with God, spoken in the language of petals, roots, and thorns. The rhythm is a prayer older than the church bells that sometimes drift up the hill. A steady, patient pulse against the chaos of fever and infection. This physical separation is a perfect metaphor for your social standing. You are both essential and suspect, a necessary evil. The farmer whose prize ox is bloated and dying. The young wife whose belly has been tight with child for 2 days without release. The child whose cough is a dry, barking seal in the night. They come to you. This new knowledge, this codified and exclusively male system, is not coming to help you. It is coming to replace you. It arrives not with a hand outstretched, but with a pointing finger. Its language is Latin, the tongue of God and law, a language designed to keep you out. You are a cunning woman, a name given with a mix of need and suspicion. But you can feel the word changing in the air. Soon the new men, with their new books, will need a different name for you, a darker name. Section 14. Title: The Currency of Survival. 2 days pass. They are not measured in hours, but in the slow turning of light across your dirt floor, in the rhythm of your own breath as you grind herbs, in the silent prayers you offer to saints you hope are listening. You tended to Thomas's daughter, using knowledge passed down like a family loom, a poultice for the fever, a bitter tea for the cough. You did what you could. The rest is in God's hands, or perhaps in the cruel whims of the humors that govern the blood. It simply proves that the cry of a soul in pain is timeless. And what remains of them? More than you think. They are not just dust and bone buried under forgotten churches. Something of them remains in us. The anxieties that birthed their superstitions have not vanished. They have merely changed their clothes. We no longer carve crosses on our doors to ward off nocturnal demons, but we check our locks 3 times. Our modern rituals betraying the same ancient fear of the darkness outside. You watch as they latch on, their segmented bodies beginning to swell, turning from a dull black to a deep, morbid purple. They are drinking the fire from him. They are drawing out the hot blood, the sickness made visible, a poison decanted from its human flask. After a few minutes, he exhales a shuddering breath. Lighter, he whispers, his eyes still closed. The hammering, it's easing. He sees the leeches, fat and heavy with his own malady, and in that sight, there is a profound, almost spiritual relief. The poison is out. The badness has been expelled. But in the silence that follows his words, every villager pictures your face. They feel the weight of his warning settle upon them, a heavier burden than any illness. His wisdom and your wisdom were 2 competing forces in the fragile ecosystem of the village. He held the keys to the kingdom of heaven, a power that was absolute but entirely abstract. You held the potential for relief from earthly pain, a power that was tangible, immediate, but deeply suspect. You were not his sworn enemy. You attended his baptisms and his funerals like everyone else. He has left you a map. Your eyes scan the herbs laid out on the rough-spun cloth. You see the lungwort, its wide, oval leaves speckled with pale spots, like the blighted tissue of a diseased lung. You know, with a certainty that defies doubt, that this is for the cough. Beside it, the brilliant, almost offensive yellow of the celandine flower glows in the gloom. Its sap bleeds a jaundiced gold. It is for the yellow sickness, for the liver that has turned against the body. This is the doctrine of signatures. Inside, there are no empty surfaces. This is not a home. It is a workshop, an apothecary, an armory for a war no one else knows how to fight. Bunches of yarrow, comfrey, and feverfew hang from the rafters like sleeping bats, their sharp, bitter, and sweet perfumes mingling in the smoky air. They are the silent chorus to your work. Your hands, stained with the green blood of dock leaves and the purple of crushed berries. Grind herbs in a stone mortar. It is a grand, celestial, and utterly cold geometry of healing. They would dismiss the bark your grandmother trusted, the very thing that is now coaxing the heat from this child's skin. But they will happily open a vein because of a light in the sky. You look from the merchant's earnest face to the sleeping boy. The sound of his breathing, though shallow, is the only answer that matters. But you hear another sound too, beneath the whisper of the wind and the crackle of the fire. It is the sound of your world beginning to fade. And in that, they are not gone. They are the soil from which we grew. What we gain when we look this honestly at these ordinary, vanished people is a profound sense of humility. We see our own world, with all its technological certainties and scientific vocabulary, as just one more attempt to map the same wild human territory. We have given their melancholy new names: depression, anxiety, trauma, and we have forged new tools to fight it. But in listening to the miller's wife describe a world drained of color, we recognize a truth that science can label but never fully contain. We learn that our sophisticated language for suffering does not erase the suffering itself. You retrieve the small clay jar from the shelf, its damp lip cool against your fingers. Inside, a knot of darkness writhes. Leeches. The farmer grimaces, a flicker of a cornered animal in his eyes. But he submits, sinking onto the low stool. The pain is a worse beast. You pluck two of the slick, writhing creatures from their watery home. They coil in your palm, hungry and ancient, a living medicine. You press one to each of his temples. There is a sharp pinch, a gasp, and then he stills, his jaw set. He tells the gathered flock, your neighbors, the people whose children you've delivered and whose fevers you've cooled, that they must endure, that their reward is not of this world. Then his voice drops, becoming a conspiratorial whisper that fills the sacred space. He warns them of the devil's snares, of temptations that look like help. He speaks of folk remedies, of whispered charms over a sickbed, of herbs gathered under a full moon. He calls them a rival gospel, a poisoned well, promising a moment's relief in exchange for an eternity of damnation. He doesn't say your name. He never does. The stone in your hand is smooth, worn by the hands of your mother and her mother before her. You press it into the wooden bowl, grinding the damp leaves into a dark green paste. The sharp, earthy scent fills the small, smoky room, a smell that is equal parts hope and desperation. From the corner, a dry, rattling cough echoes, the sound that has hollowed out your sleep for a week. Your husband's breath is a frantic prayer to a saint who seems to have turned his face away. But God has not abandoned you entirely. Your cottage is not part of the village huddle. It stands apart, a silhouette against the dusk, where the tended fields give way to the wild woods. The air here is different, carrying the scent of damp earth and things that grow without permission. To get to your door, one must walk a path that is just a little too dark, a little too quiet, a path paved with need and swallowed pride. They only walk it when the priest's prayers have failed and the terror of a final, rattling breath is closer than the fear of God or of you. It feels like a sin against common sense, a violence against a body already fighting for its life. Thomas continues, puffed up with this borrowed learning. They laugh at remedies like yours, he says, not unkindly, but with the casual cruelty of someone delivering a verdict he believes is inevitable. They call it superstition, old wives' tales. He tells you how these physicians consult charts of the heavens. They will not let a patient's blood if Mars is in the house of the moon. They will administer a purge only when Jupiter aligns with Saturn. They are in the rhythm of the seasons we still vaguely notice, in the ancient stones of a church wall, in the faint echo of a folk song. But more than that, they are in our DNA. They are in our deep, primal need for community, and in our equally deep suspicion of the outsider. They are the source of the anxiety that whispers to us when we dare to be different. They left no grand monuments, only the cleared forests, the worn church steps, and the stubborn human hope that tomorrow's harvest will be better than today's. The miller's wife, the frightened soldier, the hopeful mother, they fade like breath on a cold pane of glass. We are left in the quiet, with the echo of their lives still ringing in our ears. The overwhelming feeling is one of precariousness. Life in the Middle Ages was a constant, desperate balancing act. A balance of the four humors in the body, of sin and salvation in the soul, of a good harvest against a brutal winter, of faith against a gnawing, superstitious fear. The humors are in revolt. His blood, the sanguine essence that should bring the warmth of a summer afternoon and the joy of a good harvest, has boiled over. It is a flood tide in the delicate vessels of his head, a season of imbalance where the heat has overwhelmed the cool. The diagnosis is as plain to you as the cross on the church steeple, an excess of blood creating too much pressure. The cure, therefore, is obvious. What is in excess must be made less. He is a man whose hands are clean, whose robes are dark, and whose certainty is as hard and unyielding as the church floor. He speaks of suffering, not as a pointless cruelty of the world, but as a divine chisel, sent by God to chip away at the sins of the flesh and reveal the perfect soul within. A fever is not just a sickness, it is a trial. A broken bone is not an accident, it is a lesson in humility. Ask yourself, when faced with the inexplicable terror of a loved one's suffering, would you not reach for any system, any story that promised the path back to wholeness? The poultice is made. You carry it back to the small, dim room, the smell of wet earth and fragile hope filling the air. You apply it gently to Agnes's skin. Now, all you can do is wait for the fever to break, or for the parish bell to toll. You crush willow bark in a stone mortar, the rhythmic grinding a prayer of its own. You steep leaves of coltsfoot in boiled water, the steam rising like a whispered incantation. You are not a doctor. You are not a witch. You are a fulcrum, a point of balance, a human necessity. You are the last stand before the long silence. And as you work, you know the truth of your place in this world. They will thank you if she lives, and they will burn you if she dies. Men, always men, are learning the art of medicine. He tells you of physicians in fine robes who read from ancient Greek texts, books worth more than this entire village. They speak of the body's four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. A sickness like this boy's, he explains, is an imbalance. Too much blood, perhaps, making the body hot and wet. The cure is to let the excess out. You pause, the damp cloth in your hand, bleeding a boy already pale as milk. We see that their superstitions were not foolishness, but desperate attempts to impose order on a terrifyingly random world. We see that their cruelty was often born of a fear we can still recognize in our own headlines. We stop seeing them as caricatures in a history book and start seeing them as people, tired, hopeful, anxious, and overwhelmingly human. We gain a mirror, and in it, we see the foundations of our own society, with all its strengths and all its lingering, irrational fears. And what of them still remains in us? More than you think. You look at the miller's wife, a woman adrift in a sea of black bile, and realize the most profound comfort you can offer is not a plant, but the simple, silent act of sitting with her by the fire, acknowledging a darkness you cannot banish. You are a lighthouse keeper on a shore where the light is just a single, flickering candle, and the figures from this forgotten time recede back into the shadows from which they came. The knock on your door is not the polite tap of a merchant, but the heavy, desperate thud of a man whose world has shrunk to the size of the pain behind his eyes. It is John, the farmer from the South Field. His face is the color of a botched sunset, a florid, angry red that speaks of a fire raging within. He gestures to his head, his words a low groan. A pounding headache, he says, a pressure that feels as if his skull might crack open like a dropped gourd. You see it instantly. The sound carries across the damp fields, clear and cold in the morning air. A single, resonant chime, followed by another and another. It's the iron tongue of the church bell, calling the village to prayer. You don't need to go to know what is being said. From the threshold of your small cottage, where the scent of last night's poultice still lingers, you can picture it all. You can hear the voice of Father Michael echoing off the cold stone walls of St. Giles. Before we scoff from our perch of accumulated knowledge, consider our own rituals. We speak of balancing our gut biome with fermented foods, of aligning our chakras with crystals, of detoxifying our systems with green juice. We still crave a simple, elegant narrative for the complex and frightening reality of our own bodies. Humoral theory is gone, but the human need for a story of balance, a way to make sense of our inner workings, is as strong as ever. It is the most ancient fear of all, the fear that reminds us how fragile the vessel of life truly is. Ask yourself, when the sanctioned map to salvation fails, where do you turn? Do you cling to the fading light of prescribed faith, or do you strike a bargain with the shadows that have always lived at the edge of your world? For Thomas, the choice is no choice at all. He watches you, his hope a single, fragile point of light in the vast darkness of his fear. It's Thomas, the merchant, back from his long journey south to the wool markets. He brings with him the scent of the road, dust, sweat, and something else, the metallic tang of new ideas. He watches you work, his gaze different than it was a season ago. He used to look at you with respect, a touch of fear. Now it is something closer to pity. In the great cities, he begins, his voice too loud for the small sick room. They have universities now. He speaks the word as if it were a holy relic. The fear of a bad harvest, the hope in a whispered prayer, the sting of a neighbor's suspicion, all gone, turned to dust and memory. The timeless takeaway from their world is not just an appreciation for our own comfort, but a startling recognition. The struggle between the safety of the group and the loneliness of the individual, between the comfort of old beliefs and the threat of new knowledge, did not die with them. It is the eternal human story. What we gain when we look this honestly at these ordinary, vanished people is a profound and humbling empathy. You can only speak of humors and herbs, of sunlight and sin. The stigma is immense, a second illness she must endure. She is not just sick, she is a spiritual failure, a potential vessel for evil, a source of shame for her family. Ask yourself, when the pain is invisible, and the world offers you only shame or superstition for your suffering, where do you turn? But the elements are identical. Shame, secrecy, the eternal clash between law, faith, and a woman's dominion over her own blood and bone. Your quiet, dangerous work is the direct, unwritten ancestor of it all. The stakes, a single life, a future held in the balance, have not changed one bit. Ask yourself, when a prayer goes unanswered, is it easier to curse the God who did not listen, or to condemn the person who dared to speak to him on your behalf? As you work, you recite the properties of each ingredient, a quiet liturgy of healing. This is not a folk remedy, it is applied science. The irony, a bitter herb you cannot taste, is that Agnes's survival has nothing to do with your careful balancing act. She is alone in her fight, her body's own silent, bloody war the only thing that matters. But you cannot know this. To accept that would be to accept that you are powerless, a leaf in the wind of God's will. And that is a colder, drier fear than any humor can explain. We have emergency rooms and chemical compounds, a sterile fortress built against the chaos of the body. But strip away the technology, the fluorescent lights, and the insurance forms, and you will find Thomas's face in every parent who has ever rushed a child to the hospital in the dead of night. That primal terror, the helpless feeling of watching a loved one consumed by an invisible fire, is a thread of human experience that has not frayed in 1,000 years. You know the willow soothes the heat, that a decoction of yarrow can break the sweat, and that sleep, deep and true, is the only real prayer God answers for the sick. Your knowledge is a tapestry woven from your mother's hands and her mother's before her, a thread stretching back into the unwritten dark. It is a knowledge of the earth, of the things that grow in the ditch and the forest, of the quiet power that resides in root and leaf. A shadow falls across the doorway. Or do you guard your knowledge like a forbidden fire, knowing its warmth is the only thing that is truly yours, even if its light makes you a target? Section 17. Wind down, reflective close. The fire in the hearth dies down. The village sleeps under a blanket of stars, so bright and cold they seem to burn holes in the darkness. The lives we have walked through tonight are now as silent as that sky. They are over. You advise her husband to have music played, to make her eat warm, moist foods like chicken and well-cooked bread, to take her for walks in the sunniest part of the day, anything to counteract the cold, dry gloom that has taken root in her. She takes the cup, her hand trembling slightly. You know this may offer a little comfort, a small ritual in the face of a vast, nameless dread. But you have no language for the true nature of her suffering. You cannot speak of neurotransmitters or chemical imbalances. Ask yourself, is this power, this desperate network of whispers and roots? Or is it simply the heaviest chain of all, forged from the secrets of women who are given no other choice? She drinks the infusion, her eyes squeezed shut, and leaves as silently as she came, a ghost slipping back into the twilight. You are left with the lingering bitter smell and the weight of her future. Centuries from now, the arguments will still rage, fought in sterile courtrooms and on glowing screens instead of smoky huts. We sue for bad outcomes and rage against the limits of what is possible. Your position is simply a more brutal and immediate version of this eternal dynamic. The desperate demand for a miracle and the violent need for a scapegoat when it fails to materialize is a constant, humming pressure on any who dare to intervene in the fate of others. The child on the pallet whimpers, a sound that slices through the silence. Thomas takes a half step forward, his shadow swallowing the room. The system was beautifully logical, internally consistent, and almost entirely wrong. Yet for 1,000 years, it was the only lens through which all of human suffering was viewed. It gave a name to the chaos, a reason for the pain, and in that naming, it offered the most precious medicine of all, a sense of control. You move to the cool darkness of the larder. You need cucumber, crushed and mixed with barley water. You need lettuce leaves, damp and cooling, to lay across her burning skin. You don't ask Thomas what the priest said. You ask what she ate, when she last passed water, if she was frightened by anything in the woods. You are looking for the crack through which the sickness entered. Was it an ill wind, a mouthful of tainted water, or the gaze of the old woman who lives by the crossroads, the one they say has the evil eye? Cause and effect are a tangled web of the physical and the metaphysical, and you must read every thread. We have sanitized our fears with the language of diagnoses and prognoses. The air in the cottage is thick with the scent of boiled willow bark and damp wool. Outside, the autumn mud sucks at the foundations of the house, a constant, greedy sound. You are on your knees, your hands raw from lie and labor, pressing a cool, wet cloth to the forehead of your neighbor's boy. His fever is a fire threatening to consume the thatch of his small life. You've seen this before. You know its rhythms, its deceits. It is not divine, and so it must be demonic. They don't fear your herbs. They fear the terrifying possibility that the world is more complex than their faith allows. You shoulder the sack, its weight a familiar burden. Walking back, you feel the loneliness of your position settle in. You are the village's secret, its necessary evil. You soothe their pains, but you are also a vessel for their fears. Ask yourself, when your very survival depends on the trust of those who fear you, do you shrink your world to fit their superstitions? You crush the small, yellow flowers, which you gathered on Midsummer's Day when the sun was at its most powerful. The plant is said to capture sunlight in its very leaves. The logic is a form of poetry, a prayer made tangible. You will fight her inner darkness with the world's outer light. You steep it in hot water, the steam carrying a faint, resinous scent. You tell her to drink it every morning. You are her only ally in a world that would see her shamed in the stocks, cast out, or worse. Your knowledge is a form of quiet power, a network of female trust that operates in the deep shadows, entirely outside the control of the church, the law, and the men who write them. But it is also your greatest vulnerability. This act is a mortal sin. It is a crime. One bitter word from her, one whisper from a rival or a scorned friend, and it is you who could be condemned. You who could be tried for witchcraft. A village healer is only as good as her last cure. There is no malpractice insurance, no review board to weigh your methods against the impossible odds. There is only the swift and unforgiving judgment of a grieving, fearful community whose world is held together by a fragile web of faith and superstition. Every patient is a gamble, a roll of the dice with fate, not just for their life, but for your own. We hold our modern medical professionals to impossible standards, forgetting the human fallibility behind the white coat. You are restoring a divinely ordained equilibrium that has been thrown into chaos by some unknown trespass, a foul air, a poor meal, a fright in the woods. This was the elegant, all-encompassing science of the medieval world, humoral theory. It was a grand, unified theory of everything, explaining personality as readily as pestilence. A quiet, contemplative man was not merely shy. He was ruled by melancholy, the cold and dry black bile that made him prone to artistry and despair. A boisterous, laughing soldier was sanguine, his spirit lifted by an abundance of hot and moist blood. The air in your hut is thick and earthy, heavy with the ghosts of 1,000 dried plants hanging from the rafters. Yarrow for staunching blood, comfrey for mending bones, mugwort for driving out worms and wicked spirits. Each leaf, each root, each flower holds a secret, a power, a story. This is not a transaction of science. It is a ritual of hope against an encroaching, absolute darkness. You lay the child gently on a pallet of straw and furs near the faint warmth of the hearth's embers. Her small body is rigid with fever. It is the spiritual sickness that comes from absorbing the trauma of others, a condition they have no name for, but which you feel in the marrow of your bones. Your solitary life is an early, stark testament to a truth our world is only just beginning to learn. The healer, above all others, often needs healing too. It's an insight that chills you more than the wind. Their fear is not born of pure malice. It is born of a desperate need for order in a world ruled by chaos. The harvest fails. The plague comes on a soft summer breeze. A healthy child dies in its sleep. These are terrifying, random acts. In the face of them, they have built a fortress of belief. God, the saints, the devil, the unchanging seasons. It is all they have. And you are a crack in the wall. You represent a power that fits nowhere in their system. They whisper of a moment of weakness, a crack in her faith through which a demon has slipped, nesting in the hollow of her heart. Sin, madness, or possession. These are the only words you have for her condition. You are a healer, a pharmacist, a therapist in one. But your tools are forged from folklore and faith, not science. You offer her what you can. You go to your drying rack and take down a bundle of St. John's wort. You are the midwife, the abortionist, the silent confidant. You turn to the bundled herbs hanging from the rafters. You take down the feathery leaves of tansy and the bitter greens of rue. These are the plants that bring on the flowers, a gentle euphemism for a violent act against nature and God. As you crush them in a stone mortar, releasing a sharp medicinal scent, you give her the warning. You explain that the tea will be strong, that it will bring a cramping worse than any moon sickness she has ever known, a feverish purge. That grief, a wild and starving animal, will need a place to go, a reason, a fault. And you, the strange woman from the edge of the woods, with your strange herbs and your quiet knowing eyes, you who dared to interfere with what must have been God's will, you are the most convenient target. The whispers will change. They will speak of ill intent, of charms that soured, of a pact made with something other than the saints. Your reputation, and indeed your very life, is a currency bought with successes and spent with failures. The fever, a siege of fire and air, is a clear and terrible sign of an excess of choler, the yellow bile, which is hot and dry by its very nature. The logic is as solid as the stone walls of the church. The cure, therefore, must be its opposite. You must summon an army of the cold and the moist. Your entire diagnostic process is a quest for balance. You are not a warrior killing a microscopic invader. You are a philosopher gardener, tending to a delicate ecosystem. Your role is not merely to medicate, but to mediate, to stand in the gap between the visible world of flesh and bone and the invisible world of spirits, humors, and divine judgment. You are the village's dark mirror to the priest's bright certainty. He offers salvation for the next life. You bargain for a few more breaths in this one. The weight of that bargain settles on your shoulders as you guide Thomas inside. You close the door on the wailing wind. And you cut the door on the wailing wind, shutting the world out. They see God's mercy in a healing, but the devil's work in a death. You walk through the market, and the whispers follow you like stray dogs, a muttered charm, a hand sketching a cross in the air. You are a necessary curse, a living embodiment of the fragility they all try so desperately to ignore. The weight of the shared trauma, this collective terror of oblivion, is a burden you carry alone. It is a heavier satchel than any you've ever filled with herbs. This is the unseen wound, the true cost of caring. His wife's hands, twisted with joint pain, find relief only from the comfrey salve you prepare. He needs you, but need is not friendship. He measures out the flower, his movements precise, his face impassive. The exchange is swift, professional. There is no talk of the weather, no mention of his family. There is only the business at hand. The transaction is a careful, unspoken treaty between his world and yours. As he hands you the heavy sack, his calloused fingers brush against yours, and he pulls his hand back just a little too quickly. The priest has already been. He stood where you stand now, his face a mask of stern piety. He spoke of acedia, a spiritual sloth, a dangerous listlessness that is an insult to God. He saw not a sufferer, but a sinner, a soul too lazy to rejoice in God's creation. He prescribed prayer, fasting, and penance, a spiritual whip to drive out the torpor. The neighbors whisper of other things. They cross themselves when they pass her home. A university-trained physician, were one ever to grace a hovel like this, would disdain this problem as hysterical, a failing of the weaker female form. But here, in the fugue of drying herbs and wood smoke, this is not a sin or a sickness. This is women's business. You don't ask for a confession. You see it written in the taut line of her jaw, the trembling of her hands. You are the keeper of the village's most vital and dangerous secrets, the ones passed from mother to daughter, the knowledge that allows a life to begin or to quietly end. He simply watches your every move. His eyes are not filled with soft hope, but with a terrifying predator's intensity. He has placed his daughter's life and his own sanity into your hands, and you feel the crushing weight of that trust. It is an unspoken contract, hanging in the air like a hangman's noose. If the child lives, you are a miracle worker, a vessel for God's own mercy, blessed and revered. Your name will be whispered with awe at the market cross. But if the child dies, if she dies, that love will curdle into something venomous. You press the back of your hand to the child's forehead. Her name is Agnes, and her skin is a desert, hot and unforgivingly dry. Her cheeks are two high flags of scarlet, a warning of the war being waged inside her small frame. To you, this is not a virus. This is not an infection. Such words are ghosts from a future you will never see. No, this is a battle of the four humors, the fundamental liquids that govern all life. The one they need when prayers are not enough. In your world, sickness is not a biological malfunction. It is an invasion. A malevolent spirit can slip through a keyhole. An imbalance of the four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, can turn a healthy body into a swamp of disease. Sickness is a test from God, or a curse from something much older, something that slumbers in the dark water of the fen and the gnarled roots of the oldest oak. You are the sin-eater of their suffering. Your role is one of profound, almost sacred isolation. You are in the heart of the community, privy to its most intense moments. The first cry of birth, the last sigh of death, but you are never truly of it. You are a functionary of fate, a tool to be used against the darkness, and like any tool, you are put away when the crisis is over. Was it your knowledge that set you apart, or their fear? They need your skill with root and leaf, but they mistrust it. Your reputation is more fragile than spun silk, and more valuable than your small collection of dried herbs. Trust is your only shield, and it is a shield made of glass. Today you trade for flour. Tomorrow you might trade that same flour for your life, for a good word from a neighbor when the priest asks questions. You reach the mill. The great wheel turns with a groaning rhythm, a heartbeat for the whole village. Thomas the miller, a man as solid and dusty as his grindstones, watches you approach. He is not unkind. There is blood, hot and moist like the spring air. There is phlegm, cold and moist like a winter river. There is yellow bile, hot and dry as a summer afternoon. And then there is black bile, cold, dry, and heavy. The humor of autumn, of earth, of endings. The miller's wife is drowning in it. An overabundance of this humor, you believe, has curdled in her body, turning her spirit to lead and her world to ash. This is not a simple sickness. It is a crisis of the entire person, body and soul entwined. She is young, perhaps 16 summers, with the downy hair of a girl, but the terror of a woman trapped by her own body. Unmarried. Her eyes, wide and dark, dart to the door, to the lane, to the sky, as if the saints themselves are peering down to judge her. She speaks in whispers that the crackling fire almost swallows whole. Her monthly cycle, her flowers, are 2 moons late. This is a realm the village priest will never enter. He speaks of sins of the flesh, but knows nothing of its mechanics, its betrayals. The air in the cottage is thick enough to drink, a broth of fear, wood smoke, and the sour scent of fever. Beside the hearth, on a thin straw pallet, the child's breaths come in ragged, shallow sips. You dip a cloth into a bowl of cool, herb-steeped water, the scent of yarrow and willow sharp in the close air. But it is not the child you are most aware of. It is her father. Thomas stands in the shadows by the door, a silhouette of peasant muscle and raw-edged dread. He has not spoken for an hour. We have outsourced our healing to systems so vast we cannot possibly understand them, to anonymous faces behind screens and pills made in factories we will never see. You, however, held your entire medical encyclopedia in your head and your hands. It makes one wonder, which form of trust is more absolute, more terrifying in its totality? Ours, in an anonymous global network we cannot touch? Or the villagers who comes to your door not with a coin, but with a desperate hope, placed entirely in the woman who knows the secrets of the weeping willow? The priest spoke of God's will, of trials and the kingdom to come. He offered prayers to save her soul from purgatory. But God's will feels too much like a death sentence, and Thomas is not ready to surrender his daughter to the next life. So, in the deepest hour of the night, when God seems to be sleeping and only the old fears are awake, Thomas has come to you, to the woman on the edge of the village, the one they whisper about over ale and mending, the one whose garden grows plants the priest calls devil's weed. You are the vessel for the village's pain. They come to your door not as neighbors, but as supplicants to a grim altar. They bring their festering wounds, their failing crops, their barren wombs, and their deepest fears. They whisper secrets to you that they would never confess to a priest. The envy, the hatred, the adulterous thought that they believe has soured their milk or blighted their child. They unburden their souls and bodies onto you, and when they leave, lighter and cleansed by hope or catharsis, a dark residue always remains. It clings to you, an invisible grime. In the eyes of the village, you are perpetually seen as both. To live with specialized knowledge, knowledge not learned from a priest or a book, but passed down from mother to daughter, like a secret inheritance, is to be permanently on trial. Every remedy that works is a minor miracle, and every miracle is a brush with heresy. Every failure, every herb that does not soothe, every fever that does not break, is proof of your malevolence, your fraud. You must navigate this world with the care of a spider on its web. She has not eaten a full meal since the last moon. Her husband, the miller, a man of flour-dusted practicality, brought her to you in desperation. He speaks of her staring at the wall for hours, of her weeping without sound. He sees a wife who has abandoned her duties. You see something else entirely. In her hollow eyes, you see the classic, terrifying signs of melancholy. You see a body at war with itself. Your world is one of balance. A delicate dance of four humors that govern everything from the weather to the health of a king. The sounds of the last visitor, a man's frantic prayers against a bloody cough, have long since faded into the damp thatch of your roof. A week has passed, a turning of the great slow wheel of the seasons. Now, a different shadow falls across your doorway. She doesn't come with the clamor of a sudden sickness or a mortal wound. She arrives in a silence so profound it feels heavier than any scream. It is a quiet shame, a fear that has no name in the mouths of men. To face that storm with only one oar would be the true folly. This is not a failure of faith. It is the ultimate expression of it, a profound and pragmatic belief that you must fight for your child on every front, the spiritual and the physical, the blessed and the forbidden. You simply don't have the luxury of pretending they are separate. A life lost, well, that is a matter for whispers, for blame. Your hands could be seen as God's instruments or the devil's tools, and the line between them is as thin as a winter shadow. We, in our time, Google our symptoms and place our faith in the sterile certainty of double-blind studies. We have lost something profound in the exchange, the embodied knowledge that comes from direct, generational, and sometimes desperate experience. You can feel the heat radiating from her before you even touch her. It's a dry, unnatural heat, the kind that drinks life, a cruel summer sun burning in the dead of winter. Her breathing is shallow, a frantic flutter in her chest like a trapped bird beating its wings against her ribs. Her eyes, half open, are glazed and milky. They see nothing of this world. The village priest has already been. You know this without asking. Thomas's knuckles are white from prayer. His clothes still faintly smell of incense and holy water. But they still lit the fire, and they still knocked on your door, their knuckles raw with desperation, searching for a reason to believe in the morning. Their names are lost, erased by time like footprints in the mud. But the echo of their quiet courage remains. It is in every hand that reaches out in the dark, every voice that offers comfort without guarantee, every stubborn seed of hope we plant in the face of our own modern blights. They are the forgotten bedrock upon which our world was built. You had held his hand, a brittle cage of bones, and watched the light in his eyes gutter out. You still see the blue, silent perfection of the Cooper son, born without a cry, a perfect marble statue who never drew breath. His mother's wail is a bell that still tolls in the hollows of your memory. They brought him to you wrapped in a blanket, a desperate, impossible hope. You were their last resort before the priest and the burial shroud. You could offer nothing but a quiet room and a shared, silent grief. You gave her willow bark to chew and a poultice of yarrow for his chest. You sat with her, speaking in low tones, calming her panic as much as the boy's fever. This morning, the boy was sitting up, asking for bread. A success. But success is a dangerous thing. Was it God's grace that flowed through your hands? Or was it something else? This is the other side of the coin. The word, spoken more softly, like a curse, meant only for the wind to carry. Which? The first word is a tool. The second is a weapon. Her hands lie limp in her lap. Hands that once kneaded dough with formidable strength, now resting as if they belonged to a stranger. You have seen her like this for weeks. She is here, in your small cottage, but she is also 1,000 miles away, lost in a landscape only she can see. She speaks, and her voice is the rustle of dry leaves. There is a weight, she says, not to you, but to the fire. A stone in my soul. The colors, they are all gone. The world is just gray. Ask yourself, when our beliefs are the only tools we have against the dark, does it matter if they are true, or only that they give us the strength to face it? It is a key for a lock that the priest insists no longer exists. Was it a sin to do both? To you, the question is absurd. It is like asking if you should use both your right hand and your left to pull a drowning lamb from the river. God, the saints, the charm, the willow bark, they are all just tools in your meager kit. The forces that govern a child's fever are a great, churning sea of divine will, demonic mischief, ill humors, and bad luck. It lives in the precise bitterness of a root on your tongue, the telltale texture of a leaf crushed between your fingers, the cloudy, ominous color of a patient's urine held up to the light in a glass vial. This knowledge is dangerously potent, a truth that hums just beneath the surface of every healing. It is practical, and unlike a holy text recited in a language the village doesn't speak, its results, or its failures, are immediately, brutally visible in the flesh. A life saved is a blessing from God, they say. A blast of cold, damp air rushes in, carrying the scent of wet earth and coming rain. It claws at the small flame of your tallow lamp. In the doorway stands the face of a man you know. His name is Thomas. He's a good man, a Fletcher who makes arrows straight and true, his hands calloused and clever. But tonight, his face is a mask of terror, a landscape of fear contorted in the flickering, unsteady light of his lantern. In his arms is a small bundle, his daughter, little Agnes. Humanity's story is not a triumphant march from ignorance to enlightenment. It is a constant, grinding negotiation with fear. It is the courage to plant a seed in a world full of blight, to whisper a charm against a storm that has no ears, to light a single candle in an endless night. They feared the devil's breath in the miasma, and the wrath of an unknowable god in the plague cart's bell, and the simple, brutal truth of the coming winter. Your thoughts drift to little Agnes. You see her mother's face etched with the terror of the grave, slowly soften into disbelief, then into a joy so fierce it was almost a form of pain, as the child's fever finally broke beneath your hands. A life held, a life returned. But that single victory is a flickering candle in a vast, dark hall. For every Agnes, there's a shadow. You think of old Thomas, who died last winter, his breath a ragged, rattling bellows that your strongest infusions of coltsfoot could not mend. Elspeth fumbles with the wooden cross around her neck, her fingers tracing the worn carving. Agnes just stares, her eyes following you until you round the bend. Then come the whispers. They trail behind you like smoke from a damp fire, acrid and clinging. Cunning woman, they say. The word is a coin with two faces. On one side, respect, a grudging acknowledgement of a skill they might one day need. It was only last week that Agnes brought you her youngest, his small body racked with a fever that left him limp as a rag doll. Drop a comment with a medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. Section 12. When the mind is sick. The miller's wife sits by your fire, but she feels no warmth. The flames dance, casting flickering light on the packed earth floor and the herbs hanging from your rafters. But she is a statue carved from winter ice. Humoral theory, the doctrine of signatures, the belief that God marked a plant with a sign of what it could cure. These were magnificent intellectual structures, intricate as a cathedral's rose window, but built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated guesswork. It serves as a humbling, melancholy reminder. A reminder that what we consider absolute scientific truth today may just be a more detailed, but still painfully incomplete map of a reality we do not and perhaps cannot fully grasp. Your voice drops to a whisper, a sound meant only for the ears of the old gods who still sleep in the soil and the streams. It is a charm, a string of rhyming words that make no literal sense but hold the weight of 1,000 years. It is a charm to bind the fever, to cast out the heat demon, a relic of a time before the cross. Your mother whispered it over your own sickbed, her breath smelling of onions and fear. It feels more potent than the prayer, more ancient. Not gold or land, or a name that will be remembered by lords, but a deep instinctual understanding of the green world and its secrets, a dowry of survival paid forward through the bloodline. In an age where literacy is a form of power, a key to a kingdom reserved for God's men and the nobility, your wisdom is oral, tactile, sensory. It's a language spoken by the body. Chapter 1. The knock at the end of the world. The sound doesn't wake you. You were already awake, listening to the wind argue with the loose thatch of your roof, a restless sound like the turning of a great dry page. No, the sound, a frantic, desperate hammering on your lonely door, is merely a summons. It's a drumbeat for a battle you have fought 100 times before. You are needed, pulling a coarse woolen shawl, still smelling of wood smoke and dried lavender. Over your shoulders, you unlatch the door,